This is a powerful
We're
new
going
concept.
to revolutionize
It's
voice
really all
messages
about
where we
data
want to
collection and analysis.
We need to have an active
Fresh
voice.
ideas are what we
A
fresh
passive
ideas
voice
are what
won't
we
get us
really
where we
need.
want to go.
You are listening to Active Voice with your host Llewellyn King.
Hello, I'm Llewellyn King, your host for Active Voice. Today we're going to look at an extraordinary utility. It's headquartered in Rockwall, Texas, which is just outside of Dallas. It's north and east of Dallas, and it is part of the Dallas Metroplex, which means it's got very high rates of growth, and it's a very unique situation that it finds itself in. It also itself is a unique utility. It's a rural electric cooperative association, which means that it provides electricity to its members. It has 4 members, and it's not that old. It hasn't been around forever and ever. 1935 is when the electric cooperative movement started in order to do something about the dearth of electricity growth in rural areas. But this one dates back to just 1979. I have with me today its Chief Executive Officer and President, David Naylor, and Heidi Scott, who has written a book about this utility and about how they came to be, and it's a very readable book. It's published by Forbes, but let's begin with David Naylor. What, in your mind, makes your utility different? I've read Heidi's book, so I know something about it, but you tell me.
I think what makes us different is, the purpose behind Rayburn is we're here to make our members successful. As you mentioned, we're a cooperative, and we're seeing rapid growth, and we want to make our members successful. That's what we're about. But embedded in that are the employees, and without the employees, there's a lot of things we couldn't get done that we've gotten done. I mean, the folks that we've got, have it's an honor for me to be able to lead these folks. The way that they operate, they work hard. We have a lot of fun in doing so, and just trying to maintain that culture where folks really want to be here. And ultimately, again, we're here. We serve our members.
You've written a book, Status Quo Is Not company policy. It's available on Amazon. Heidi, how do you make, most people think of an electric utility as being fairly a vanilla undertaking, a bit dull, and yet you've written a book which says this is a dynamic, forward-thinking, dramatic organization with remarkable leadership qualities, which includes obviously David, but throughout the organization. It's grown in 5 years from me worth $300 million in your book to over $1 billion. And tell me, what is special? What did you find when you started doing this book that you said, hello world, this is interesting and different?
Well, thank you for that question, Llewellyn. The thing that's so special about Rayburn and why this book, I think, is resonating so well already, even though it's just been released, is that the principles, it could be any industry. What David was just talking about, like the people are everything. I mean, we could be talking about water, really retail, startup, tech. It really wouldn't matter which industry. The culture of Rayburn is what we really wanted to capture in this book. It's a very unique approach to running any kind of organization. And I mean, I've been out there a few times on the campus, on the Rayburn campus. It's this really beautiful blend of like, it's a party and yet everybody's working really hard at the same. I don't know quite how to describe it. That's why we needed an entire book, I guess, to describe it. Everyone is thoroughly supported in their jobs, but stretched at the same time in just the right ways. I don't know how David and his team has been able to find that perfect balance between pushing and supporting in a way that brings out the very, very best in every single person there.
In a sense, David, this can be read as a self-help book for managers. how to do it, how to get it right, how to be transparent, how to make sure that everybody gets recognition so that they remain happy. What have you found is your largest challenge, not on the electric side, but on the people side? Because the book largely deals with the ability at Rayburn to manage people, or rather to have people manage themselves in a collective way.
Yeah, so without a doubt, the biggest challenge it is the people, and we're a multi-generational organization. We've got baby boomers, we've got millennials, we've got Gen X's, we've got Gen Z's, and how do you integrate all of those different personalities for a common purpose? And recognizing that this is not a one size fits all. We've got to treat people with respect. We want to operate with integrity, but then we also push. Our other two core values is the excellence and innovation, and so we want to encourage everybody to do their best. It's not perfection, but everybody do their best. And then we always are looking, and this is where status quo is not company policy came into play. Are there ways to improve what we're doing? And so that provides a buy-in for all the employees. And they can look at what they do in the day-to-day and say, hey, I'm not just checking a box. Is there a way to make what I do better? And then we're happy to implement that and work for that. So it gives everybody a common purpose. They work towards a common goal. And, we're certainly not perfect by any stretch, but we're always working to try to improve. And, fundamentally, I just believe if you make the employees better, then the organization as a whole is better.
There are some things that are quite special about running an electric utility of any size, one of which is you can't shut it down to retool. You can't have all the managers go to a retreat for a weekend and shut it down while that happens. It's a little like air traffic control. You have to keep all the airplanes in the air all the time, 24/7. That changes things a lot. That means that you really have not only to hire the right people, but to rely on them in the middle of the night, at 2 a.m, at 5 a.m. The electricity has to flow. How does that affect the culture of the utility?
So it certainly makes a challenge. We've got, got different people that work at different times. We've got people, to your point, who are out in the field, so they're not necessarily a part of the day-to-day organization, at least, here at the office. We've got operators who have to work on shift, and you may not see the same operator for, 3 or 4 weeks easy. So that's where we really rely on our human resources group, and they do a fabulous job trying to make sure we organize events that bring people in together. We have make sure our supervisors and our managers, they'll even go out in the field from time to time and meet and take the linemen to lunch. So you have to be deliberate. And that's really what we're trying to do, is recognizing, different people have different roles. We're all here for a common purpose. And, Llewellyn, to your point, we're making a difference in people's lives. If they don't have electricity, it's I think it's almost as bad as if you don't have internet now, but it's
you won't have any internet without electricity, and you won't have any artificial intelligence without electricity. I've had this theory for quite a long time now, which I probably shared with you at some point, David, and that is that people are lucky who work in electricity because what they do, as you just said, is good for people. It's not like making bombs or anything, or even useless things like, I don't know, metaphorically, plastic oranges. How did you find the electric business when you came to it, Heidi, as an open-minded writer? Was it as you anticipated? Was it very different? Did you expect the amount of esprit de corps that you have identified at Rayburn, and which is very much part of the subject of your book?
It's a wonderful question, and the answer is absolutely. I was stunned. I hope, David, is it okay if I talk about how okay.
Sure.
So I actually joined the project as a ghostwriter. The original idea was that this would be a story that would tell the survival of this particular electric co-op through a cliff event that destroyed so many facilities in Texas, which was called Storm Uri. For anyone that's not familiar with that, it was a devastating storm that happened in February of 2020.
2021.
21. Thank you. I'm a writer. I do words, not so much numbers.
I just read it in your book.
I know. So the idea was that I would come in and help them basically document how they did as well as they did when many others were not able to survive or thrive the way that Rayburn did. And I thought, well, that's great. I can do that. I've worked with many corporations documenting their history. I've written biographies. I've all this. And so being the ghost writer was the role that I was super comfortable with. And I thought, I don't really know that much about electricity, electric co-ops. I just enough to maybe like use a few of the words intelligently, but that was about all. And so my expectations was very similar to perhaps writing an insurance book, something like, I guess I'll just learn. So I came in with, like you said, an open mind, figured I'll just learn what I need to learn. I'll gather the facts. We'll put together a nice little timeline of the story of Rayburn Electric, and it will be zipped up, wrapped up, and done. And it was not too long into starting this when I realized this was not going to be the project that I expected it would be. As the title says, status quo. It's not making things better. It's making things better, and also questioning whether those things actually should happen. And that really interesting twist on innovation and versus just improvement was fascinating to me. And then, of course, as we got further into it, my role morphed, and I became less the ghostwriter and more of the actual writer. And I was shocked. I still, to this day, I can't believe that this tiny little electric company that's not far from my home, as chance would have it, it is so special. It's remarkable. And we had to tell the story. I drank the Kool-Aid, as they say. I became one of the Rayburn fans, and so I'm solidly in that camp now.
Your book has three different themes, really. As I said, the esprit, the extraordinary common energy at Rayburn, the history of Rayburn, and management as such. And much of it could be read by anybody in management anywhere. And I've been to a lot of very large electric utilities where I've noticed the chief executive officer often has one of the management books, whether it's by Peter Drucker or one of the simpler ones. I think you quote The 7 Habits of Organized People or something like that. I don't have any of those habits. Alas, David does. He's very organized. And I wonder how you came to these channels. Did you find the history the most interesting? Did you find the culture the most interesting, or pure management?
Oh, I don't know if I could really choose between the history. I'm definitely a story person. I love the story of how in a way the underdog survives
and why.
Yeah. So that was fascinating. The culture and the leadership was a surprise. And it was ever unfolding. The more we worked on this book, the more I interviewed so many people in the company. They pretty much gave me a free rein to pull anyone aside and ask any questions that I wanted, which says something about the company when the executive team can just turn a writer loose and say, who do you want to talk to? What do you want to ask? We don't need to vet any of your questions. We don't need to carefully choose who you talk to. I could walk up to anyone in the hallways and just say, hey, can I have a minute of your time? And the culture there is such that there was no concern, there was no worry about what would be spoken by every employee. And I think that, to me, that made me even more excited, because I thought, I have something really special here. There's a story within the story, and that's why we pushed it further into those other two areas that you mentioned. It became less of a history and more of the leadership. It takes a really unique leader to be able to take their hands off the wheel and say, all right, random writer that I don't even know, ready, go, have fun, play, tell me how it goes.
David, the book makes much of your hiring practices, hiring the right people. How do you do that? David, beg your pardon, Ben Bradley, the legendary editor of the Washington Post, for whom I once worked, said, if he gets 1 out of 5 hires right, he thinks he's won. It's not a very good average, but when I ran a business, a publishing company in Washington, I would say that 1 out of 2 was probably the person I really wanted. And some people do not live up to their resumes or to your skills in interviewing them initially. How do you do it? And how do you find people that are going to fit in and enhance, not detract from the culture that you've developed there at Rayburn?
Yeah, I mean that's a huge challenge. We want people to be additive, not subtractive. And so, I think there's a couple of things that we do. I mean, look, we did a pretty poor job initially, and that's where I'll say we were project focused. As we shifted to more value focused, that's when we really started seeing a shift, and the people that we hired, they were people we wanted to stay, and certainly made a big part. And again, we've got a great team of individuals that help vet during the interview process. So one of the things we try to do, it's pretty typical in an interview process. You're going to have the human resources person. We have the manager this person will work for involved. We also bring other people in from other parts of the organization, and their role really is to help assess the culture fit. The second interview that we do, we typically take the person out to lunch, and again, we'll bring in a wider subset of the organization, just trying to make sure, again, does that culture fit? Now, I'll tell you the other part of it, Llewellyn, is if we have somebody that doesn't fit, we make a pretty quick decision, and we'll wish them the best, and we'll let them go their own way. So, it's that combination of, in a lot of ways, it's a little bit of a cliche, but we want to fail fast, if we have to. But again, trying to make we put a lot of effort into the interview process, and who participates to try to help make sure we've got a good fit.
I wanted to add one thing that I observed while I was there, is that many of the fairly new recruits were recruited by people who already worked at Rayburn. To me, I think that's a real testament to the culture that they have, is that those who work there want to bring others. And it wasn't just a nepotism thing. It was like, oh, I have a really good friend and they're really good at this. And they would recruit those that they already knew would fit well within that culture.
I think that's very interesting. And it might be frowned on by some people in the human resources movement, but in fact, I think it works very well, even though it may look a bit like nepotism and who's in the club. But you get the people you want. They're pre-interviewed by life, as it were. I like stories. I like narratives like you, Heidi. Tell us the story of the beginning of Rayburn, which is not that old, and how for a while for quite a long time, it was probably the world's only mom and pop utility. The Kirklands, as you lay out in your book.
I'd actually kind of want to defer to David. Knew the Kirklands. I never had that opportunity because they've passed. David, would you rather tell that story?
I'm happy to. So John and Annette were employees number 1 and 2, and Llewellyn, you could call it my naivety or whatever you want. Normally, kind of like Ken DeVore's at Alabama is learning what it means to follow Nick Saban on a football coach. And that's what I did. John was employee number 1, and that was employee number 2. They were here for 32 years, and then they left me, and here we go. But Rayburn, again, as a generation transmission cooperative, Rayburn is relatively young. And what worked in the past when, when John and Annette were here, and then as they started to add employees, when I came on board in 2011, it was, I was employee 8. So very small organization. We contracted things out a lot. And the reality is we didn't have a whole lot of additional things that we needed to do. It was all contracted out, both the power supply and working on our transmission lines. We actually had very minimal, didn't have a lot of compliance obligations. And then in 2014, the board made a strategic decision that then started ramping things up. And then when I took over in 2017, it was that implementation. And frankly, that's where status quo is not company policy came from, is because we had at that time about 20 employees, and we had some hard and fast deadlines where we were going to have power shut off if we did not make those deadlines. And so my task, if you will, or my message to the employees was, we can't keep doing what we're doing and meet these deadlines. So status quo is not company policy. And then it's evolved over time. But yeah, it was very much the mom and pop organization, small time. I will say it was a little more relaxed, but we certainly did not have. We're not making as much of the impact as we were, just because we didn't have that strategic direction. But as we continued to add resources, continued to expand, had additional compliance requirements, and then we had this facility, add the employees, add the facilities, and hey, look, we're not done yet. This area is growing like crazy, and we're doing our best to keep up and even get ahead of the game.
You are listening to Active Voice with your host Llewellyn King.
We'd just like to remind our viewers that the book is Status Quo Is Not Company Policy, and the author is Heidi Scott, along with David Naylor. And one of the characters who's intriguing in the book, and I understand still works, having been one of the early employees, still works at the company, is Shannon Bieber. Yep. Tell me about Heidi, tell me about Shannon Bieber, who you describe in the book as being there first thing in the morning, turning the lights on, last thing at night, turning them off, and being an extraordinarily self-motivated person who is still an executive, if I read the book correctly.
She's moved up into a management position.
She is in a management position, yes.
Yeah, she was fun to talk to, because she really is one of the few, even prior to there's not many that have been there even prior to David coming on. The Kirklands hired her just to do the books, to handle the numbers, and they were very commonly, they would be so busy out doing what they needed to do that she wouldn't see a soul. She'd come in, work all day, and leave and not have seen anyone. Because there was only 3 of them at the time. She would also answer the phones and open the mail and any other little thing. She was kind of a hybrid administrative role as well. And she was, the memories that she has of those days, of course, are very fond, but she's seen the explosive growth that's happened. And what this is, again, indicative of the way that Rayburn approaches things. They're not going to just leave her in an accountant position, because she has this knowledge and this experience, and she's incredibly skilled. And so they help her to move into what is now a management. I can't even remember what her role is, David. Manager of projects?
Yeah, I think she's a manager of project coordination.
It says project management or project manager.
There we go.
In the book. I mean, I don't want to tell you what's in the book that you wrote.
I apologize. I've written a few.
The company you run, but there you are. David, apart from the wonders of the management and the incredible creativity and passion of Rayburn Electric, it is an electric utility, and it's a very troubled time for electric utility, or if not troubled, very challenging. We have changes coming, the demand is going up, a lot of pressure not to burn fossil fuels, and yet an enormous need to add the quantity of electricity available, difficulty in building transmission lines, resistance to almost anything you want to build, and goes by the not in my backyard syndrome. How do you see the future? You are expanding, you own a large gas turbine, 750 megawatts of gas turbine plant, and you're expanding that by 500 megawatts. That's a lot of power. It's all gas. Is that your only option?
So no, it's not our only option. We're also looking. Llewellyn, we just were awarded a grant from USDA under the New Era program. That's going to go to batteries. We've got some solar projects that are we've got under contract. So we're really trying to take an all the above type of approach. Nuclear is even out there, and for an organization like us to be looking at nuclear is probably a little bit of far cry, but frankly, it fits in with the book. It's just what are those options that are out there. Again, I think that gets back to the quality of the employees that we have here too, because my biggest philosophy is I want to hire really smart people and then get the heck out of the way. I've got a board member who it's actually our board president. He says that his mentor told him to always be the dumbest person in the room. So, I think that makes a lot of sense. We've got some great employees here. We're able to throw things up on the whiteboard, talk through the various things. Everybody can have their input, and we can kind of figure out what's going on. The other part that's to that, Llewellyn, all the things that I just had said initially, all that's on the supply side. We've also implemented a distributed energy resource program, a DER program. So we're tackling on the load side as well. So we're hitting both sides of the equations here, trying to give ourselves the options, give what's best for our members. Again, ultimately at the end of the day, electricity is an essential service, and people are concerned about what they're going to pay. And we're trying to make sure that we're prepared to handle both the unknowns that are coming, as well as managing and make sure that there's a value to the service.
Your growth is dependent very largely on the growth of the area, the phenomenal growth of Texas, and particularly of the Dallas area, and the homes that you serve. What happens when that levels off? Do you lose your dynamicism?
I think at that point we all get to take a vacation. We've been saying that growth has to slow down for probably the last 10 years, and it just hasn't. Now all that being said, we're certainly mindful of where the risk points are and what happens. But by the same token, as we've staffed up, again, the folks that we have here, they're all valuable contributors. So I don't see that being an issue. We'll just refocus our issues or our work elsewhere. Well, the other part that is really related to this, even though it's not your historical electric utility focus, is the data. And, so we're really looking at what can we do with the data, whether it's, from a dashboard standpoint, can we put some tools in our members' hands to help them better manage their electricity and solve, the supply side thing. So, we continue to look for opportunities, what makes sense, what's coming down the road. Again, that's why it says status quo is not company policy. We always want to be mindful of how can we improve, even if that means we scrap plans that we were doing before.
I might say so. Data is very important if you're pursuing DER, which is largely based on data. And for viewers who may not have heard what DER is, it's distributed energy resources, and that includes conservation, unusual generation, and utilizing underutilized assets, all the way down to car batteries or electric vehicle batteries. Heidi, the book is peppered with little observations from different people and little bit nuggets of general wisdom from Aristotle to I don't know where, but also technical information about stuff that people know or think they know, particularly people who are not engineers but are involved at some level in the utility business, either in the service company or in some other part of the utility. And one of the intriguing stories in your book is about William Stanley, who really invented the transformer and should be up there with Nikola Tesla and Edison as the creators of the electric revolution. Tell us about him.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I'm not an expert on him. I had to do research myself. I was a very newcomer to the idea of electricity. But as I learned more about it, I realized, why do we not know about Stanley? We know Edison, we know Tesla. Those are part of our lexicon in our culture. However, Stanley really, he was the cornerstone to the AC current. It's fine to have electricity, but until you can store it and use it, doesn't really do a lot of good when you're talking about a population to the size of America. And so the AC current, which is what we use, not the DC current, which is what Edison had proposed. It is really because of this invention, this groundbreaking invention, which we don't even think about. We drive past, probably most of us every day, we'll see transformers, but we don't understand exactly how crucial they are to us getting electricity in our home. That's from the generation to the end user. There is no other way without having that transformer. We would be still in the dark without Stanley.
Interesting. And of course, the supply of transformers is rather critical at the moment, isn't it, David?
It is.
Particularly pole transformers and the large ones, which have for a long time been made in China.
Yeah.
How are you managing with hardware supplies?
So supply chain issues are still there. We recognize those long lead items, and so we actually are. Whereas historically we would not order anything until we had a set project. I mean, now we're ordering them before in anticipation of projects, and so that helps. By the time they're delivered, the project is ready to be started. So we're just ordering things a lot sooner, recognizing the lead times. We did go to what we call a sole source arrangement with Texas Electric Cooperatives to help shore up some of that as well. We feel that puts us in a better position, but that's what we're trying to do, is just mitigate that from,
As a final question for you, David, what do you see as the interesting things on the horizon outside of the big known things like small modular reactors, fusion, the big hope items? What small things? How about better conductors, better poles, that kind of thing? The small parts, but vital parts of the electric infrastructure.
Yeah, so I think you're right. The composite poles are becoming more and more interest. I mean, particularly on the coastal areas of the state and the U.S. The wood poles are great in that they're easy to throw up and easy to find materials typically, but they're also the first to break when you have tornadoes, hurricanes, and the like. And so, seeing those composite composite poles get a little more strength, a little more resiliency. The conductor size and conductors is going to be the other piece, particularly as we start looking at other options. And Llewellyn, you mentioned earlier that you've got the not in my backyard mentality from a lot of folks, and it is becoming more challenging to build the infrastructure that needs to be built. And so we've got to find a way to be able to utilize our existing right-of-ways, utilize the existing infrastructure that's there. And so can we replace the conductors with better conductors, stack them in some ways so that we're able to get more power flowing through the circuits with the same amount of space that we took up before. I think, again, I'll go back to the data. You know, we're seeing generations and seeing people now wanting to be more active in how they manage their own use of electricity, whether it be because of a budget that they want to operate on in terms of they've got so much money to spend, or whether they just want to be more proactive as they have electric vehicles, or rooftop solar, or just they want to, like I said, save dollars. And so putting tools in those in their tool belt, if you will, where they can help manipulate, recognize if I can shift power, or if I don't use it here, or maybe I can do this and I'll use less electricity. All that's going to add up, and I think those are where you're really going to see the differences.
Andy, for the last question, what in the book, in researching the book, did you find most exciting? What thing did you not anticipate finding that you went away very glad that you had learned?
You know, the concept of the flat organization was, I can't believe I've gone this long in my career and hadn't heard this concept.
Just explain the flat organization, because I didn't
absolutely.
get to it. There's a lot in the book. I couldn't get to all of it.
No, that's okay. That's you'll take your time. But the idea in typical corporate America is the triangle, where you have your executives at the top and your managers, and it trickles down, and then you have everybody that does the work at the bottom. And some organizations do better than others in terms of accessibility of those that are at the top. But with Rayburn, it isn't. There's an image in the book. I don't know if I can flip right to it, but it's not a structure. It's not a hierarchy. We've generated a little graphic where it's just people, all the people are connected to each other. And so it's not David at the bottom and it's not David at the top, it's David with everybody. It's a team, it's working together. One of the gentlemen that I interviewed that works for Rayburn talked about his experience working in the military prior to coming to Rayburn, and the level of authority. In order to ask a question from one department to another, you had to ask your boss, who asked their boss, who then would relay it to the boss and then back down again. And then they might say yes or no, and then it would have to come all the way back up. And it was such a hindrance to progress, even to slight improvements, because there were so many layers of approvals. And with Rayburn, if someone has a question, they just know you go to that person that you need to find out, whether it's David or anybody else. You just go ask the question, and you
call it flat management. Flat
organization. Yeah, there's no. You don't have to worry about not being approved by your manager to talk to so-and-so. They've dispensed with that entirely. And that just still thrills me. I want to work there just because I want to enjoy that. And that doesn't exist anywhere that I know.
Well, there's a lot to think about in the book. There's a lot to enjoy in the book, a lot to learn from it. And I repeat, the book is Status Quo Is Not Company Policy by Heidi Scott with David A. Naylor. And David, President of Rayburn, thank you for joining me today. And Heidi, a delight to meet you, and what a wonderful job you've done with this book. Congratulations.